Mr. Speaker, this would be a joke if it wasn't so serious. And just to bring all of us back to the actual substance of the debate that we are having today, which I think that we lost with the Co-Deputy Prime Minister and his contribution earlier, what we are talking about and what we are debating as a House right now is a completely unprecedented punishment handed down by a committee that has operated in such an explicitly partisan way, departing substantially from the convention that this House is currently saying that it intends to try and uphold. So riddle me how we try and make sense of that logic. I also find it absolutely galling to hear effectively from members of the government all of the hand-wringing about the waste of this House's time that is this debate, when they are indeed the ones who forced this debate and indeed invited the Speaker to make the point that this should be a broad-reaching debate because of the fact that this is such an unprecedented situation which government members themselves have created by handing down such a partisan, such a punitive punishment without any meaningful logic. So, Madam Speaker, I say to members of the government, get an absolute grip. We have also heard from the so-called party of free speech that they intend to try and curtail the freedom of speech that is the expression of the law, that is the LORE, of this very land. And Madam Speaker, what we're debating today is also, I think it's really important to note, history-making, but not in a good way. It is history-making in the sense that the Privileges Committee have made their punitive, their partisan nonsense so utterly obvious, and this House has an opportunity to reject that. I just want to actually point to some of the comments that I've heard from the likes of our Prime Minister in the public sphere about how this has been a matter for the Privileges Committee solely to deal with. That is no longer the case. The fact that this is now on the floor of this House means that all 123 members of this Parliament are personally, directly responsible for whether this historical, punitive, partisan nonsense continues any further. To make that explicit, the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Christopher Luxon, is personally responsible if his side of the House votes to continue and to move ahead with these punitive partisan punishments. Madam Speaker, as was alluded to by my co-leader, the Honourable Marama Davidson, the historical precedent for punishment and for suspension in this House is so far out of whack from what has been handed down by the Honourable Judith Collins and the Privileges Committee. The longest suspension previously was for 3 days for Rob Muldoon, for comments that he made about the Speaker. We are talking about 3 days versus the 21 for each of the 2 Te Pāti Māori co-leaders and 7 for Hana-Rawhiti Maipi-Clarke, who has already been punished, Madam Speaker. This is ridiculous. And I also need to make the point, because we heard from the co-Deputy Prime Minister earlier when he took a seat as Prime Minister's chair, that when he was speaking about contempt and contempt for the House, I think it's really worthwhile to actually inform the House at the time that the last time, as I understand it, that the Privileges Committee did not make a consensus-based decision, and in fact it was, and here I am reading explicitly from the Privileges Committee report back then, for the member, the Right Honourable Winston Peters, who knowingly provided false or misleading information on a pecuniary interest. That was the Right Honourable Winston Peters who has the gall to stand up in this House and to talk about our code of conduct or the way in which we conduct ourselves and the standards that we set. Once again, and time again, Madam Speaker, we see members of this government invoke convention and invoke rules and the regular standards of conduct that we all expect. But Madam Speaker, we do not see those same rules apply to themselves or to their behaviour. And interestingly, just to finish that story on the Co-Deputy Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Winston Peters, and his Privileges Committee complaint, the last time that we had that Privileges Committee not operate with consensus was because New Zealand First defected on those punishments being held down. Here we have a totally different circumstance where it is solely the governing parties who are deciding to use their power of the bare majority to force this unprecedented punitive punishment against the opposition of 3 opposition parties. So to be crystal clear, Madam Speaker, what we are talking about here is unprecedented for 3 key reasons. The first is the scale of the punishment. It is plucked seemingly completely out of thin air. And it's fascinating to read through the report from the Privileges Committee, where they speak, for example, about how the committee needs to be guided by the precedents established by previous Privileges Committees, but then decides to hand down a punishment that is 7 times the worst punishment that the Privileges Committee has ever handed out before, without any explanatory rationale. They also speak to, on page 7 of the Privileges Committee complaint, and here I quote, that members are expected to conduct themselves appropriately and in a way that is befitting of elected representatives. Madam Speaker, I don't know about you, but I saw the power of 100,000 people outside of this place who were demanding that their voices were heard in here against the inflammatory, intentional nonsense of the Treaty Principles Bill that was intended to divide, Madam Speaker. Further to that point, we have a lot of hot air about the notion of certain members feeling intimidated or otherwise, and there's a very spurious reference to finger guns. And Madam Speaker, I would just draw the House's attention to the fact that the Honourable James Meagher earlier in this debate was offering those same finger guns to me as he was heckling in the House. So, Madam Speaker, I just really ask members to...
I've got a point of order from the Honourable James Meagher.
Well, the Speaker has totally misrepresented my actions in the House, and I'd ask for withdrawal apologies.
So the member is stating that he didn't do that. I think it's probably a good idea for this member who's speaking to... speaking to the point of order, Ingrid Leary.
The member did, and I think that it is open to any kind of interpretation. Some of us did see it and did question it. I'm not saying that I thought it was threatening, but the member did do that action, and some of us on the side of the House did raise eyebrows.
Right, well that's Yes, speaking to the point of order.
Represents what happens, and I'd like to ask her to draw an apologise as well.
Well,
Speaking of the point of order,
no. Just if the member contends that he didn't do what other people thought he did when they saw it, maybe the member would like to explain what was intended. Because, yeah. Okay, so he pointed at the members, right? Carry on.
Absolutely. Madam Speaker, I am so grateful for that interjection from a member of the government to precisely prove the point that we are making here, which is that the kinds of things that the Privileges Committee has come to a...
I've got a point of order from James Meagher.
Madam Chair, the member made the claim that I made the finger guns action, which is quite clearly outlined in the Privileges Committee report, and as evidence in that report. That is not what happened. That misrepresents...
So the members made it quite clear that he was pointing at the other side and not making the finger gun, so I have accepted that. I think what I hear, the member who's working her way through her speech at the moment and has made reference to what we think we see sometimes may not be what was intended, and that is the point that the member's trying to make. So I accept that the Honourable James Meagher did not intend to make finger guns at people.
Ngā mihi nui, Madam Speaker, because I think that is indeed precisely the point, which is that when we have a tyranny of a bare majority deciding to interpret...
Point of order, Jamie Arbuckle.
Thank you. The member needs to withdraw and apologise.
No, the member's making a point of principle and interpretation about what people think they see, and we're very much cleared up that the Honourable James Meagher did not do a finger gun, right? Carry on. Chloe Swarbrick, end of matter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Indeed, the point is that the things that we do in this place, the points that we make, the directions that we point our fingers in are open to interpretation, and the spurious, punitive interpretation that the government members on the Privileges Committee have chosen to take without any meaningful evidence or rationale is unfair and deeply, deeply partisan. So, Madam Speaker, if I may continue on outlining that rationale of just how unprecedented this is, it is not only that the scale of the punishment has been plucked out of thin air, it is not only that this is so incredibly hyper-partisan and therefore dangerous in the precedent that it is setting, but I also think it's important to note the utter psychological warfare with which government members have decided to conduct themselves on this matter. On the day prior to the budget, we were all anticipating that we would be having this debate, and indeed members of the government allowed for that debate for certain contributions from the chair of the committee and from the leader of the opposition, but then decided to, without any notice to anybody else in this house, to move to suspend the debate, ostensibly for charitable reasons. Madam Speaker, that rationale simply does not wash, because again, if you look at the rationale within the Privileges Committee report, this is all about partisanship and using the might and the power of the bare majority to ultimately bully. And we in the Green Party, along with our colleagues in the opposition, are proud to stand in opposition to that. Madam Speaker, just to make that...
That is a barrage. Points of order, points of interjection are okay, but that's a barrage.
If the government of the day can decide to pick a punishment out of thin air with next to no rationale or any meaningful historical precedent that they can point to, and to use their bare majority to force that punishment onto the opposition, Madam Speaker, we are in incredibly dangerous territory. That is not democracy, which members of this government so frequently cite as the ostensible aim of all of this legislation that they are ramming through at a rate of knots without any care for the convention or the rules that they say that they want to uphold. And I guess that's the point that I'm really getting to in all of this, Madam Speaker, is that no logic washes with this government. No evidence washes with this government. Indeed, the needs and the wants of the people outside of these halls of power, it does not wash with this government. And what we are left with at the end of the day is that it is crystal clear who they work for. And it is not the regular people of this country. Because, as they consistently show us, they have utter disdain for regular people's engagement and participation in the likes of our select committee processes. And in fact, at times, they'll refer to them as bots. Madam Speaker, the Haka is celebrated by this place when it is convenient. But the Haka is a challenge, it is a reflection, and it is the law of this land.
Hana-Rawhiti.
Okay. Chloe and being interjected left, right and centre.
I love it when they shoot themselves in the foot with their own point of order.
Yeah.
That was just delicious. That was so amazing. Chloe couldn't have scripted that better if she'd paid for a member of the government to actually interject. They proved their own point. Well, they proved her point, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
They really did.
And the Deputy Speaker got it straight off.
Yeah, well, Barbara's been on fire today.
She has been. It's a nice change to see.
Yeah. And the weird one was temporary speaker Tangi Uduketa.
Yeah.
Who just felt like it was just like a normal was it a person who was part of the normal speaker team in the chair.
Yep. And I think it's quite interesting. Chloe made the point about the fact there's no evidence base, there's no fact base, there's no logic or reason behind anything this government's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
and she's also right. Like, Parliament only likes Haka
When it's conveniently
they say-
positive.
Yes, when it's convenient for them.
Yeah.
It's, they will take our taonga, they will take our carvings, they will take our waiata, they will take our karakia, they will take our haka and celebrate it until we use it against them. It's ridiculous and it's disgusting, and I don't even know why this has to be such a big deal. Like, yes, they stepped out onto the floor. Yes, they interrupted a vote. They didn't interrupt a vote. They interrupted a counting. But it would never have had the same impact if they had waited.
And wasn't it nice to have someone speak about the bill, entirely about the bill, or the recommendation, rather than use it as a
soapbox.
political slinging match,
Yeah.
It was all focused entirely on the recommendations of the Privileges Committee and why it was an inappropriate recommendation.
Yeah.